Hello and welcome to the Let's Talk Azure podcast with your host Sam Foote.
And Armstrong.
If you're new here, we're a pair of Azure and Microsoft 365 focused IT security professionals. It's episode 4 of season 7. Alan and I are about to discuss a new mechanism for managing configuration drift. Microsoft have recently added new management APIs provided by Microsoft Graph to help organizations and MSPs manage configuration drift and making sure that your settings are aligned to your security baseline. We've noticed that a large number of you aren't subscribed. If you do enjoy our podcast, please do consider subscribing. It would mean a lot to us for you to show your support to the show. It's a really great episode. It's going to be a really great episode. So let's get started. Hey, Alan, how are you this week?
Hey, Sam, not doing too bad. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I have to start with, an apology because we were meant to record this episode last week, but I was bushed last week, so I definitely couldn't have made a recording whatsoever. So yeah,
no, that's cool. It's cool.
Yeah,
heard anything in the news or anything?
News. I've seen a lot of really good events going on at the moment. Like Experts Live Denmark was on this week, wasn't it?
Yeah,
and I can't believe the amount of people they pulled into that. Fair play, to the team that are running that, because so many Microsofties flying in for that, right? Really cool, really great to see. Look like a really, did they have? Was it second day today or something like that? I can't remember, but yeah, I've been seeing a lot on LinkedIn about it. It looks really good. I'm actually quite jealous, to be fair.
It's largely run by Morton and the MVPs that are running the sessions and bringing Microsoft over, Rod Trent, things like that are over there, aren't they?
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, really good to see. And yeah, I've heard really good things about. I don't think I've ever been, and this is bad of me to say, but I don't think I've ever been to a community event for Microsoft. I've been to one. I have been to South Coast Summit. I think I went years ago. Is it South Coast Summit? Yeah, but I definitely want to start getting to some of these more, because I do feel like, the bigger ones are more obviously Microsoft and product and solution focused, but I kind of feel like you get really good insight, technical insight from these more community focused events, right? It seems like, because I think I might have seen a slide or something that Morton had put up that, people asked last time for more technical sessions, like level 300, level 400, give us the good stuff. Do you know what I mean? So, I definitely think, and it also seems like they're pulling in these really big names from Microsoft, right? Really important people in different product engineering teams, and the community. So, yeah, really cool to see,
Yeah, I think last year they had the VP for threat protection or something like that go over.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, it's really good to see. So yeah, fair play to everybody that volunteers and makes that happen. It's really, really amazing to see. Yeah, very jealous. Very jealous. How about you, Alan? What's been on your sort of radar?
Some stuff last week was around Claude and Claude security, knocking off a load of some of the market last week. Supposedly, potentially helping with.
Are you talking about CrowdStrike's price, stock price dropping because Claude was basically saying that they could do proactive. Was it proactive EDR or something like that? I can't remember what.
It's in effect that their agent, their AI, could potentially run I think almost. I haven't read into it fully, but basically do everything a SOC analyst for them. Basically,
yes, that was it. It wasn't any. I remember this because I saw the screenshots on X. Right, people had basically screenshotted the share price of CrowdStrike, and they were like, you do realize they're talking about two completely different things, basically. Because I remember now. Yeah. Oh yeah, it was. Yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it? To see what's going to happen in those spaces.
Yeah, because I think CrowdStrike's CEO or CTO has basically come back going, no, yeah, like you said, probably like, it's not even related, really, sort of thing.
Apples and oranges, basically.
Yeah, but
yeah, because I think it was like somebody from Halcyon or something like that was saying like, yeah, good luck like stopping ransomware. Like, do you know what I mean, with your agent or something like that? Yeah, I did see that. It's cool. It's funny. Really good. Not funny if you're like those types of people that have to like, protect or justify the existence of your software solution because some AI player has just made this like extravagant and bold claim. And we're not saying that any claim is right or wrong or anything like that, right? No. The efficacy of anything. But it must be hard for vendors in those spaces to say, well, we're not quite there yet with the robots taking over. Let's just, hold on a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's definitely getting close to that. I think some of that with some of the stuff I've been talking with customers about around some of it. It's a bit like, ugh, yeah, I see the value, but I see the scary side of all this. The only thing I will say is I've switched over to for my little like coding side projects. I've been trying to use I've been trying to vibe code more with Copilot, basically, because I kind of feel like, I'll say an ex-developer, like an ex-professional developer, right? That, Jesus, some of the stuff that it can produce is insane, right? You do have to be a bit careful with it, like as in because you need to know how all of it like structures together. But I switched over to Claude, I think it's 4.6 or something like that, with Copilot, GitHub Copilot, and it's been incredible actually. It's come so far since the last time, because I remember when back in the day, well, it wasn't really back in the day, it wasn't that long ago, but when GitHub actually announced it and it first dropped, when it was in pre-release and beta, it was good. It could help you complete, right? But now the chat functionality is incredible. Like it can understand your files, it can generate code for you, it can modify that code and understand the context of what it's doing, even writes tests for you automatically. Yes, you have to be there to validate it, you have to make sure it works, and it does kind of hallucinate. But what's also cool is that it does have like knowledge of the real world. So if you want it to program something against time zones or pulling from a specific data source or API, it can pull that information from the internet as well. So it's not just got the context of your code, it's also got the context of like the big wide world. Do you know what I mean as well? Mm-hmm. So I was actually really impressed with it. Could it run a SOC? I'm not sure, but like what I've been using it for, it's been pretty cool. It's been pretty cool. No, it's cool. It's cool. Okay, what's this episode on then, Sam?
Yeah, so we're going to do unified tenant configuration management today. It's a new in-preview service from Microsoft that can help you with configuration drift with all your settings across 365.
Ooh, interesting. I've wanted to take a look at this actually. So
I fired it up. It's pretty cool, to be fair. I'm excited for it. Yeah.
Wish I had time to do that. Okay, well, let's get started then. You mentioned configuration drift. What is it and why is it a challenge?
Yeah, so if you think of your configuration in any solution, but we'll use the example of Microsoft 365 because that's what we're talking about today, right? Mm-hmm. So all those settings that you can set in things like Entra, Defender. Some of them are a simple checkbox, aren't they? Users can or can't create new tenants, or users can or can't add new guests into your tenant, right? Or something like that, right? Very basic settings. Or you can have more complicated implementations, like things like conditional access policies or in-tune device configuration profiles, right? So imagine all of those different things, and spoiler alert, this system can manage over 300 different types of configuration. So that gives you an idea of the scale, and it doesn't cover everything, and we'll talk about that. But so if you imagine there's at least 300 different things that you can configure, and some of them you can configure multiples of them, like conditional access policies, right, and layer them on top of each other. Now imagine making sure that is aligned with your security baseline. Okay, so let's take the example of, enforcement of MFA, right? Let's say we've spent loads of time configuring our, conditional access policies to enforce MFA at the right times and the right strength of MFA. Okay, so we've gone through all of that. This is the 1st of January. We've come in after the holidays, and we're like, right, we're gonna really make a really secure baseline for our conditional access and our MFA, right? What happens in 3 months' time, because multiple people in an organization could, in theory, edit that. And they could make changes to it for testing. They could make changes to it to improve it. And how do you know that it is actually enforcing your baseline over time? So we talk to, clients about this. How long should you do an assessment? How long should you do, an assessment aligned to your baseline and understanding whether you're still secure? Because I have seen it firsthand, where, clients think they're protected for something, but their actual configuration isn't aligned to that expectation. Okay, I won't go into any specifics on that, but that does happen in the real world. Settings gets tweaked for testing. Or maybe Microsoft releases a new setting as well. That's, it releases a new concept, to protect an organization against a specific attack vector. There's also that as well, making sure that you're picking up those new settings as well. So yeah, so it is a challenge, especially in larger organizations that maybe have, multiple tenants, complex inter-tenant B2B collaboration. It can get very complicated, and especially if you are resource constrained, maybe you don't have the budget for, multiple security focused, individuals and headcount. You might have an MSP that manages this on your behalf. You might have an MSSP that helps you manage some of this on your behalf as well. So there's lots of people that could, in theory, make changes to your environment. Hopefully only the privileged ones that actually do have access, but keeping track of it can be a real challenge. And there are some third-party tools. I think there's like M365 DSC. I think there's a desired state configuration tool. I've never used that before. But there are tools out there, and this new implementation has superseded that tool, because that was community driven, but it was sort of under the umbrella of Microsoft. There's obviously also third party tools that and first party tools that just do assessment as well. Secure Score. What's the new one? What's the secure score of secure scores called? Exposure management. Yeah. Sorry, I had a mind blank there. Your various secure scores, exposure management. You've got third parties. We've talked about Scuba Gear before, Steam Pipe, Enforcer. I can't think of any others, but there's loads of tools that will do assessments for you as well. But what we're really trying to focus on here is these configuration items and also objects and resources being changed without you knowing over time and drifting away from your security baseline.
Yeah, and I think as well with that and this sort of situation is it's not, like you said, someone might have made a change for testing. It might be that it's a legitimate change, but without understanding context of it, you may be reducing the security posture or something, or a scenario kind of thing. I've had conversations like probably you have, Sam, where and again this is probably larger organizations where someone's configured something specifically to meet a requirement, for a certain part of the business. They can only access conditional access to the example here, but they can only access resources from these IP addresses, example, this region, etc. Someone's complained they can't, gain access to something from a different region and put a change in and gone through, the legitimate process, but the wrong people may have been asked to approve it, been approved, change been made, and then that config is now broken. Well, it doesn't meet the requirements of the business, that kind of thing as well.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and the part that I haven't really talked about is like documentation and baseline, because how many organizations out there can actually say that they've got a well-documented baseline for their as configured 365? I'll wait, right? So, being able to define what your baseline is and then using some sort of automated tool to check that baseline as well, multiple times per day and over multiple days, weeks and months and years could be really powerful.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked about Microsoft having a solution for us. Can you go into more detail or tell us about it?
Yeah, so in preview is what Microsoft is calling Unified Tenant Configuration Management APIs as part of Microsoft Graph. So Microsoft sees it as, in traditional tenant configuration management, any admin within an organization can use their credentials to access the resources, to whatever they have access to. But administrators, they have full control over that tenant configuration, but they lack visibility into whether it deviates from, the desired configuration state. So, Unified Tenant Configuration Management, or UTCM APIs, allow administrators to control and manage those configuration settings across however many workloads within the organization, and we'll talk about those. And they can do it through a declarative representation. So they can declare it once, put that into the system, and then the system then uses that declared value to then do the drift from. So if you've ever used any sort of infrastructure as code tooling, Terraform, OpenTofu, etc., Bicep, you will know that you declaratively declare all of the resources that you want to spin up, right? And the state at which they are spun up, right? So you'll say that I want a virtual machine with 8 V cores of this family and 64 gig of RAM, etc. And it will create that and it will give you that exact virtual machine every time. So this isn't creating anything, but what it is it's checking all of those configuration items. Okay, so you're saying I always want to have a conditional access policy called this with this these properties enabled in my set of conditional access policies. You declare that to these APIs, and then it will constantly check for the presence of that resource. So, yeah, it's not just looking at simple Boolean like checkboxes. Like I used the example of like users can create tenants in Entra before, like yes or no. It can actually reconcile the differences of a list of resources as well. So I use the example of conditional access policies because you build those up and build a list of them, but it can check individual ones with specific names and properties as well. The big thing here really is that these are APIs. They are distributed via or accessed via Microsoft Graph. So as far as I'm aware, currently as of today, there is no user interface to manage this. It is all via programmatic APIs. Now, why is that? Because we need to think about and this is an assumption of mine, who this is really targeted at. I feel like this is giving MSPs software solutions more direct access to configuration within 365, more than it is really focused on like an end organization managing this through an API. Right, it's more programmatic from that perspective. So, I think the real opportunity here is if you are an MSP, an MSSP, somebody that's got a software solution that manages or backs up the configuration, because that's a big thing, backs up the configuration of 365. This is for you, because there's a lot here as well. I mentioned 300 objects. I read the number 300 in a few blog posts as I was looking through it. I counted 600, but there might be duplicate. But whatever that number is, let's just go with a 300 number. That is still a huge amount of different resources that we now have available, because Graph previously was quite limited in what it could see in the security space. This is a lot of stuff, right? Like absolutely tons is available inside of this.
No, it sounds very interesting. I think I'm going to be looking into this.
You will. Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, you said about the 3/600 resources. I guess what areas is that covering?
Yeah. So really good broad coverage for the Defender suite, the Defender security suite, Entra, Exchange Online. Intune is covered, Purview is also covered, and Teams. So what's missing? SharePoint is missing today. I did also, it wasn't in the documentation. I looked. So I went and looked, no SharePoint. And as far as I can see, no Power Platform or Fabric support today. So, yeah, because I think the big thing there is SharePoint for me, because there's a lot of governance, policy, and control with SharePoint because of what it manages. Same as for Power Platform and Fabric, but that's less focused on today. But yeah, SharePoint missing is quite a big one. Now, what they have is they have the object schema on what's called Schema Store, which is it's linked from the documentation, so you can click on it. It's a JSON file which describes the object schema of all of the objects and the properties that you can track on those types of different objects. So, for instance, if you want to track a conditional access policy, it has all of the different configuration properties that you can track against, all of the grant controls, all of the scope controls, network locations, blah, blah. It's everything that I believe it's everything that's available in Resource Manager is essentially available here, especially for Entra. And I've looked across a lot of it. So I have fired this up in my dev tenant, and I use the example of a conditional access policy. So I had a conditional access policy. I created. I'll talk about how you do this, but yeah, I created a configuration monitor to check it, and then I changed it, and then it did actually show me a drift with that. So it does work. I'm not saying, well, who wouldn't have thought it wouldn't, but it does work, and it is very, very powerful. So yeah, but Defender, Entra, Exchange Online, Intune, Purview, and Teams. I mean, that is, except for SharePoint, it's really good
coverage to start off with, isn't it? A preview.
Yeah, this is a preview, remember? Yeah. Only available in Azure Public Cloud as well. None of the DoD or ViaNet or anything like that.
The Gov ones, yeah. I mean, that's understandable because you have to wait for those builds to be approved. And
correct.
Stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, okay. Yeah, it's definitely good coverage. I've just started looking in the background at that schema.
Yeah, it's massive, isn't it? Yeah, it's huge. Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, I see. I'm going to be doing that on Friday. Right. So, yeah, can you tell us how to use it?
Yeah. Okay. So sort of the bulk of it really is. I'll talk about the different process that I went through, because I would say that the current documentation is quite light, but it is designed for developers to read it, really, I would say, because the actual higher level documentation is like a couple of pages, and then it's just down into like the actual like API reference. Do you know what I mean? So I had to work out the order in which I go through it. A lot of like MVP blog posts helped me with this as well, to be fair. So the first thing you need to think about is authentication. Okay. There's a new first-party service principle called Unified Tenant Configuration Management, and you have to add that in. But you can just do that with a single push in either PowerShell or Graph to do that. Then you need to give that service principle, I think you have to give it a role against Graph for it to do the configuration monitoring on your behalf, basically. But it's very easy to do. There's in the documentation. I couldn't get the Graph calls to work, so I ended up using Azure CLI and used the PowerShell. And the PowerShell example worked perfectly there for me, because it actually gave me the object IDs for the first-party service principle, the new one for UTCM, and also the Graph one that I needed as well, because I didn't have that to hand. There are 2 new Graph permissions for this as well, for you as an administrator to manage these. So it's configuration monitoring.read if you just want to read all of this, and there's a read write as well that you require. So the first thing that I created, once I got all that set up, and by the way, you can kind of set it up before you do that, and then it will fail to run, because that's what I did first. I completely skipped the authentication section. I gave myself the correct Graph permission. I just created it. So make sure you go through those authentication steps first, because I didn't, and I had to go and fix it later on. And when it errored, it didn't give me an error message. It just said it failed, which was very confusing. That's my own fault. I should have followed the instructions. So whatever. Could have been a better error message. Anyway, so what you do is the first thing I created was called a configuration snapshot. And what this essentially does is you give it a scope of resources that you want to snapshot, and it will give you a JSON representation back of the current configuration, like how it's configured today as a snapshot. So you could just use this to back up your configuration. You give it a name, and then you give it a list of different types of resources. So if you're looking at that object schema, Alan, each of the different object types have got a unique name. So it's like entra.conditional access policy or something like that. I can't remember the exact thing. Yep. So you just list all the various ones that you want to pull back in your snapshot, because all of these items can be scoped. We'll talk about API limits and limitations later, but all of these things can be scoped. So you can have multiple configuration snapshots looking at different things. So you can do that. So what you do is you give it a name. The name has to be unique. I know that because I tried to create 2 with the same name and it failed. You give it a name, and then you give it the types of resources that you want to snapshot. And then you submit that, and then it runs in the background. And then there's an API to pull your configuration snapshots. And you can obviously pull them by name and then grab an individual one. Once it's complete, there is a status property on it. But once it's complete, there's a link in one of the objects. It just gives you the HTTP GET full URL that you need. It is just the ID of the snapshot, so you can work that out if you want, to grab the actual baseline. What I did is, for my example, I just did conditional access policies across the board. So for my example, I asked it to create a config snapshot for my conditional access policy. It listed all of them with every single bit of detail that you would ever need to recreate them afterwards. So that's one thing. So snapshotting, pretty good, because I do get questions from people about whether people should be backing up their config, and files in 365. So this is a good way to be able to get your configuration, as built configuration, out as well. Okay. So that's one, like, I would call it like use case of it. The main one that I would say, though, is the configuration monitor object or resource endpoint. So this is similar to a configuration snapshot, but what you do is you pass a reference to each specific type of object that you want to create a monitor for, and the properties that you want to track on it as well. So you give it that configuration. So you say, I want to track conditional access policies, and I want to track the names of them. We'll keep it very simple for the moment, right? So I want to know if somebody updates the names of any of these conditional access policies. Configuration monitors only run, I say only, they run every 6 hours, and that cannot be changed at the moment. Okay? That seems quite aggressive timing anyway to me for configuration management, but hey ho.
Yeah, you'd think like 12 or 24 hours, wouldn't you? Really,
you would, and I'll talk,
would be reasonable.
Yes, and I'll talk about the API limits and how that affects things after this. So, there's another endpoint then. So so we've set up that configuration monitor, and again, you can have multiple of them. I'll talk about the API limits. I'm going to go back to documentation and read through them, but because there's quite a few. And then what you have is you have another API endpoint for configuration monitoring results. Okay, so what that does is it tells you every time a configuration monitor ran. So every 6 hours, you would have an entry in this, and it will tell you the amount of drifts that occurred for that specific configuration monitoring run. Okay, so if you were alerting on this, you could say, I'm going to go and check for new configuration monitor results, and I'm going to do something, if I've got more than 0 drifts that have occurred during that configuration monitor. So, but the real, special source really is the configuration drift endpoints. So there's a list API endpoint where you can pass it a reference to a configuration monitor. And this is where I meant, when I said like the documentation was all a bit weird, it's not in the right order in the documentation. So it's like configuration drift is near the top, but you need a configuration monitor like to create it. Do you see what I'm saying? So you have to kind of work it out. You can list all the configuration drifts. So this will give you a list of all the drifts that have occurred across all monitors relative to the baseline that you specified when you created the monitor. It will give you the old, the new, and the expected value in the drift. So you don't have to cross-reference back to your baseline to know what it should be if you want to report on it. So it gives you the name of the drifted property. Well, it gives you the information about the resource as well. Like if it's the conditional access policy. So it would tell you the name of the drifted property. So in my example, the name of the conditional access policy, what the current value was, and the desired value against your baseline. And that is the system in a nutshell, right? It is just API endpoints. So the only thing I was thinking of here is that you're probably going to want, if you're going to use this, you might want to build some automation around this, like, a logic app, Power Automate, whatever, to pull these and maybe log them to like a Git repo or, Power Platform or something, because they don't last forever. So should we let's talk about API limits. Let's talk about limitations actually, because that's worth knowing about, because there are a few, not really bad, but there's things that you need to be aware of if you're implementing this. My browser just closed randomly, so just 2 seconds whilst I just fire up my tab again, because I need to read through these because there are some specific bits with it. Just 2 seconds.
So whilst you're grabbing that then, I've got a question.
Yeah.
So when you're building the baselines, is that based? It's tended to be from your own configuration, but is that something that you can provide to it as a baseline?
There is no ability to pull a baseline that is stored. You have to provide your own baseline for everything.
So it has to be part of the tenant already configured, is what I mean. So, or can you post in there saying this is what I want the baseline to be? Or is it baseline what's currently there and then tell me
you tell it what you want it to be. Yeah.
Okay.
This is my desired state, and then it will go and check to see if the tenant is in that desired state.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Yeah, but there is no like an Intune with their baselines. There's none of that.
Oh yeah, there's nothing baked
there's
in.
There's not a CIS baseline that you can say, hey, create a monitor for me with this baseline. There's none of that today.
No, but the community could create that, and then someone could use that to put it in. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because I believe the 365 DSC tool has that today, so it has baselines in it. So we may see those shift into this at some point.
Yeah. No, cool.
Okay, so let's talk about limits, because there are limits. Okay, so you can configure up to 30 configuration monitor objects per tenant. So you can have 30 things monitoring, and they run at a fixed interval of 6 hours. Right. An administrator can monitor up to 800 configuration resources per day per tenant across all of those monitors. But you decide how you use the quota. So the example that Microsoft give, if an admin includes 20 transport rules and 30 conditional access policies in a monitor's baseline, that monitor tracks 50 resources per cycle. Simple. The monitor then runs every 6 hours, so 4 times a day. This results in 200 monitored resources per day. Additionally, additional monitors can be created until the 800 resource limit is reached per day.
Okay. Per user?
No.
Say. Per tenant?
Per tenant. 800 configuration resources per day per tenant.
Okay.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
When the administrator updates the baseline of an existing monitor, all previously generated monitoring resources and detected drifts for that monitor are automatically deleted. So if you're going to use this for logging and monitoring and archiving, etc., it has to go somewhere else, because this isn't a permanent data store. And we'll find out more about that in a second as well. Okay? So that's the monitoring. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then you've got drifts. So these are the things that are created when it detects something's changed. All active drifts are retained and available for administrators to review at any time. Because they're going to be, they won't be created, I wouldn't have thought, but they're being, in theory, created every 6 hours, aren't they? Or updated, refreshed every 6 hours.
Yeah.
Once you fix a drift, it's then deleted after 30 days once it's been resolved. So again, if you need that historical evidence, it's going to have to go somewhere else. A snapshot, that first API that I talked to you about, you can extract a maximum of 20,000 resources per tenant per month. This is a cumulative limit across all snapshots. Yeah, there's no maximum number of snapshots that you can create per day or per month. You can generate as many as you need, as long as the total number of resources extracted stays within the 20,000 resource monthly quota for the tenant. You can only see the latest 12 snapshot jobs in the API. Once you get to 12, if you want to create more, you have to delete your existing ones first. So you have to manage that yourself. A snapshot is only retained for a maximum of 7 days, after which it's deleted. So it's not for backup. It's just for creating the snapshot today. And they are the limitations. So let me just see. I did have some other notes on limitations as well. Yeah, okay. So that's API limits, okay? Any questions on that, Alan, before I go into my general other limitations that I can see with it at the moment?
No, I need to get my head around the monitor and the 800 config per day.
Yes.
And if you
how you break that up. Yeah.
How you break that up, but also if you had more, does that mean the next time it runs, does it do the ones that it missed kind of thing, or was it the first 800 and then you never capture those last ones?
Yeah, I don't know how it fails. I didn't test that. My dev tenant doesn't have enough in it, but yeah, I didn't get to what is the status code that you see there. Does it cap you? How does it prioritize? All of that.
But then I suppose if it's running 4 times a day, maybe it's only the first one of that day that has. You might get stuck with the first one of the day is the full capture, and then after that, the rest are air quote pointless. If that makes sense.
Yeah. The only thing I would say is let's hope that they relax the 6 hour. Right. Because it would be cool if we could set it to 12 or 24, or even speed it up. Because if they're giving us a daily limit anyway, however we reach that or don't reach that is up to us, really, isn't it? As long as we don't breach the 800, right? But so there's that. But it might also be a performance thing. They purposely limit the 800 so that you scan less, but you scan it more frequently, so they're not hit as hard each scan. Does that make sense? So there's some things to juggle around there, because I do think that the 800 isn't necessarily bad, because I'm trying to think in my head, do you already have like 800 things in a standard tenant? Probably not, right? But it could be pretty. But for instance, you can search all your users. Yeah, so you can do configuration drift on users and groups.
Yeah, I was thinking as well. If you believe, well, from your view, if there's 600 different configurations, you just did those, then it leaves you 200 to
instances of those
objects. But
right?
Conditional access, you might have 10 or 20, maybe, and policy, purview policies, things like that. You could have 10, 20 DLP policies, that kind of thing, if that's covered. But it's just thinking of the multitudes of the minimum you could collect. That's all.
Information protection, labels.
Well, you shouldn't have tons of those, but yeah.
Well, yeah, all right. Label groups, baby. So what about Intune configuration? Right? I've seen some pretty beastie ones of those. So who knows what it's going to scale to? Organization size wise.
Yeah.
But like I said, you can do configuration drift on user properties. Right? Like, there's so many different types of objects. Like, it's everything, right? It is literally everything. So even things that you wouldn't think about actually drifting, or wanting to track to drift. But that could also be a really cool thing, because you might have a property. You might have a property that you want to, as part of your JML process, you want to make sure that it's all your users have got that property, right? So you could use this to track the drift of them, potentially, But then you're going to hit you could hit your 800 very quickly, because with 800, if you had 150 users and you check them 6 times a day, right? So how does that all work? So my general thoughts about limitations were, as I was going through there, product coverage. We don't have SharePoint today. But let's put that in, in the real world here, we do have a lot of other things. So, but I'm just going to say it doesn't cover absolutely everything. It is your defined baseline. We talked about this. There is no off-the-shelf CIS, Microsoft, CISA, whatever it is, baseline that you can just say, apply it. Maybe that will come in the future, or maybe Microsoft will leave that to the community and, software vendors to do that.
It'll be either that or it'll be a link on their Learn page to their GitHub of the
JSON to create it.
But
yeah, that's what it's going to go into the security GitHub repo, isn't it? I assume so. Yeah. We've talked about it, but data is culled over time. You can't really store data here. You can store your current drifts there, which is fine, but that's like live reporting. But anything that is created needs to go somewhere else. So it needs to go to a database of some sort, log analytics somewhere, somewhere else. I don't know where the API limits could hit larger tenants, but you do have to go careful with scoping, because if you scope all your users and all your groups, you're going to hit that pretty quick.
And actually, just thinking about it, to be fair, it is in preview, so maybe they've limited to understand people hitting these limits and working it out rather than everyone going, like you said, mad with it.
That's the next question, but we're not currently paying for it, are we? So, there's that. We'll talk about that in a second. And then it's all API based. So this might not be for you anyway. Product integrators, MSPs, MSSPs, people like me and you, yes, this is great for. Is this a product that an internal team would use? Yes, if they are technically competent enough to use it, but they might also just license a software solution that integrates this, because I'm pretty sure I've already seen multiple products just say, we're going to support this. We're implementing it now, Yeah.
Yeah, that or the community will provide.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
Deploy to Azure, Logic App, whatever.
There's going to be an open 365 baseline, isn't there? Repo created, very shortly for this, surely. Right?
Yeah.
I'm not pressuring anybody to create that. I'm just saying it's highly likely that somebody will make their flavor of that. So that's the limitations that I could think of. But again, it's in preview, so it's new.
Cool. Yeah, so I guess coming on to cost and stuff, I guess in preview it's probably not a chargeable thing, but do we think it might be?
Well, so this is also a question for you as well, because I don't have an answer. What license is this going to need? Is this P1 or is this free?
I guess the question will be is graph. Well, there's going to be graph limits, and I think there is actually some limitation on how much you can call a graph. And I think, if I remember, there was something like you could get an extra license to increase that if you were doing a lot of graph calls generally.
Yeah.
But obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but to pull the data for the different workloads that you've suggested, you need the licenses for those, don't you, to be able to configure?
Yes, that's fair. Yeah. And yeah. And I was just thinking, we don't know where it's going to go, but it's obviously processing and storing data, isn't it? It's a service that Microsoft has to run. So the cost has to be absorbed or charged somewhere, doesn't it? So the only thing I was thinking is, will it go into P1, P2? Potentially. It's not really it's more of a graph thing, is it? No, so there's that. But also there are chargeable APIs in graph as well, isn't there? So they could make this consumption based if they wanted to, because they've got that for other stuff. So they could use that mechanism to charge for it.
Yeah, it's that, and I know, like you said, they're storing a little bit, but it's not huge amounts, is it? Because they've limited it. So, and that's maybe why they haven't built the interface and stuff to maybe reduce that cost. Because obviously, if you've got an interface to something, then they've got something else to maintain from that point as well. If they're letting organizations either build, software, companies build, interfaces, etc., or allowing customers to just use, API calls to it, if capable, then there's less for them to maintain per se.
Yeah, it's just sort of a back end API management instance, isn't it? From
yeah, I mean,
in my naive head.
I mean, the question will be is whether this is something that would fall into exposure management.
Yeah, it kind of is, isn't it?
It's almost. I mean, the question might be as well is that what exposure management is actually based on? Secure score, things like that. Is it just
have they just exposed it? Yes, exactly. Are you already paying for it, and it's just being used by Microsoft tools now? Have they just exposed what was already there? Could be.
Yeah, because
could be. Yeah,
maybe that's it. Maybe the customization of a baseline, which you can't do in exposure management at the today.
Yeah.
They're given that option via third parties, via the API, and then maybe they're looking to bake in an interface to be able to do it. Maybe. I mean, again, that's probably quite a lot of work to allow it to be customizable. If that makes sense, it's probably a lot to think about from a UI perspective. So maybe they're trying to get an idea of how much organizations want to use it, if that makes sense, to then understand if they want to put the effort in.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think just generally a really, really cool tool. Because, and being selfish for me, I did think that the security elements of Graph were lacking. And this is everything now. Now, the only thing I will say, actually, no, I missed a big point, actually. There's no auto-remediation or remediation. Yeah? So there's no write to any of these properties. You can write to the config of these, these scans.
That's a good thing, though, I think, in some way. But again, this is coming back to secure score. There's no press a button, do it. It tells you to go somewhere most of the time to go and fix it.
And I'm more calling that out because if you do have a tool that can modify back to your baseline, then this isn't going to be for you. Because I think 365 DSC can do that. I think it can call back. So
yeah, and things like Enforcer and things like that can. Correct. Yeah, they can return back the config stuff. But again, like you said, there may be these tools might be DSC. Is maybe not that one, but maybe some of the other ones like Enforcer and things like that might be looking at using this to help.
Oh yeah,
steer. It rather than building it themselves, kind of thing.
And if it does remain as part of your base tenant cost and license cost, there's no real downside, is there? As long as those third party tools can get access to this data, that's the hardest part. There could be no additional uplift in cost for end organizations, is there?
Yeah, and this helps as well because, like you said, it's read write to this config. That's not read access. The service has got read access to the configs, but the third party won't necessarily need that direct access to all of that stuff. To write stuff to automate the remediation, yes, but from a read perspective, it's going to be really easy, easier. There's no what's the word. There's less friction to providing access, is what I'm thinking, around APIs, service principles, that kind of thing, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, because you only give it access to configuration monitoring, don't you, in either read or write?
Yes, and then configuration monitor has read access to the configs itself within your tenant, kind of thing.
This whole system can't write to any of your config anyway, right?
Exactly. So, or break it or anything. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's cool. Really good. Yeah, love it.
Yeah, that's definitely something I'll be looking at with Chris on Friday.
Yeah, I another consultant in my, I'd seen it on LinkedIn and stuff, and another consultant in my team was like, "Hey, maybe we should be using this because this is really helpful." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to fire that up," and then I did, and it didn't take me very long. like a tool to get it set up. And I just think how it could be automated as well, right? It could be, especially because we have that object schema as well. Like, yeah, that's really, really, really powerful. So, yeah, really good. Really good.
Yeah, and the fact that that's publicly stored somewhere, it means that you can look for changes. So when new stuff gets added, you can go, hey, something's changed. You need to add, need to add more things.
Correct, yeah. You can see the diff of that, can't you? And when it gets updated, 100%.
Yeah. Cool. Is there anything else around this?
No, I'll just give it the caveat. It's in preview. I fired up in my dev tenant, had a play around with it. I haven't run it at scale. It's pretty new, so yeah, go and test it out. And if there's anything I've missed, comment on any various platforms or send us abuse on LinkedIn or whatever.
On that note, did you enjoy this episode? If so, please do consider leaving us a nice review on Apple, Spotify, if it's good. This really helps us reach out to more people like yourselves. If you have any specific feedback or suggestions, we have a link in our show notes to get in contact with us.
Yeah, and if you made it this far, thanks ever so much for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Yep, thanks all.